It took them less than 5 minutes to erase 10 years of my life. All it took was one email. No subject line, just a PDF attachment. That's how I learned I was being replaced. By something that doesn't even bleed. I sat there, staring at the screen, feeling my pulse slow to an eerie calm. Then I laughed. A sharp, bitter sound that echoed in my empty office. They thought they could automate everything, but there was one thing their precious AI couldn't replicate. One thing they'd forgotten I still controlled. My name is Claire Halstead, and until 30 minutes ago, I was the lead software engineer at Brightlayer Innovations. Now I'm just another casualty of progress. Another statistic in the great automation revolution. The irony isn't lost on me. I helped build the very thing that made me obsolete. The PDF was clinical in its brevity. Position eliminated due to operational restructuring. NeuroScript integration complete. Your contributions have been invaluable. 3 sentences to summarize a decade. I scrolled down, expecting more, but that was it. No signature. Just a timestamp. 3:47 p.m., Tuesday, October 15th. I leaned back in my Herman Miller chair, the one I'd picked out when we moved to this building 5 years ago. When Brightlayer was still pretending to care about employee comfort, through the floor-to-ceiling windows, Evanfield stretched out below, all glass and steel and October rain. Somewhere in this city, Kevin Rourke was probably celebrating, our new COO, barely 35, with his Stanford MBA and his TED Talk about human-AI synergy. What a joke. NeuroScript. Even the name was pretentious. I'd argued against it in the early meetings, suggested something warmer, more approachable. But Kevin had insisted on something that sounded like it came from a sci-fi movie. It needs to sound revolutionary, he'd said, his eyes bright with the fever of disruption. I was the one who taught it to understand context, to parse emotion from text, to generate responses that felt almost human. Almost, that was the key word, wasn't it? Almost human, but more efficient. Never tired, never asked for raises, never pushed back in meetings. My phone buzzed. A text from Maya in HR. Claire, please stop by my office before you leave. We need to discuss your transition package. Transition package, another corporate euphemism. I wondered if NeuroScript had written that text too. It probably could. I'd fed it thousands of HR communications during the training phase. I stood up, my legs surprisingly steady. 10 years of code reviews, late nights, product launches, team meetings, birthday cakes in the break room. All of it compressed into a PDF and a transition package. My fingers found the small USB drive in my pocket, the one I always carried. Old habit from the startup days when we backed up everything manually. The office was quiet. Most of the developers were probably in the West Conference Room, doing their daily stand-up. I wondered if they knew yet. Probably not. Bad news traveled fast at Brightlayer, but not this fast. I had maybe an hour before the whispers started. I walked to my desk drawer and pulled out the photo I kept there, our original team, all 20 of us, standing in front of the first office. A converted warehouse in southeast Evanfield, more garage than tech company. I was grinning in that photo, genuinely happy, believing we were building something that mattered. Fuck them, I whispered, sliding the photo into my laptop bag. The rain had picked up, drumming against the windows with increasing intensity. Perfect weather for a corporate execution. I pulled up NeuroScript's admin panel on my monitor, my fingers moving automatically through the authentication screens. There it was, humming along, processing requests, learning, growing. My digital replacement. Most people didn't know about the architecture's hidden layers, the ones I'd insisted on for system integrity. Kevin had signed off without really understanding what they were. Why would he? Technical details were beneath him. He trusted me. That was his first mistake. The memories came flooding back as I packed my desk. 2014, that's when it all started. I was 28, fresh out of my second startup failure, when I met David Park at a tech meetup in Portland. He had this vision of building an AI that could truly understand human communication, not just process it. We're going to teach machines empathy, he'd said over cheap beer and cheaper pizza. I thought he was insane. I joined anyway. The early days were magic. 20 of us crammed into that warehouse, surviving on ramen and pure adrenaline. I wrote the foundational code for what would become NeuroScript's emotional parsing engine. Every line was a small victory against the impossible. We'd stay up until 3 a.m., debugging, arguing about implementation details, dreaming about the future we were building. David was a real leader then. He knew everyone's names, their kids' names, their coffee orders. When my dad died in 2016, he gave me 3 weeks off, paid, even though we could barely make rent on the office. Family first, he'd said. The code will wait. Everything changed when the venture capital came in. First round, 10 million. Second round, 35 million. By the third round, David was spending more time in board meetings than in code reviews. That's when they brought in Kevin Rourke. I remember his first all-hands meeting, Armani suit, perfect hair, that practiced smile that never quite reached his eyes. We're going to scale intelligently, he announced. Leverage our human capital to build systems that transcend human limitations. Transcend human limitations. I should have quit right then. But I stayed. Partly out of loyalty to David. Partly because I believed in what we were building. NeuroScript was my baby. I'd nursed it from a simple chatbot to a sophisticated AI capable of generating content, analyzing sentiment, even writing code. The language model I developed could understand context and subtext better than most humans. The isolation started slowly. First, they moved me from the main floor to a corner office. You need space to focus, Kevin said. Then they started having strategy meetings without me. Too technical for your skill set, he explained, as if I hadn't been strategizing since day one. I tried to warn them. In a meeting last January, I presented a paper on AI feedback loops and the danger of removing human oversight. We need people in the loop, I argued, not just for quality control, but for ethical guidance. NeuroScript learns from patterns. If we're not careful about what patterns we feed it, we'll create a system that amplifies our worst biases. Kevin's response was a masterclass in corporate dismissal. Claire, we appreciate your emotional investment in this project, but we need to think bigger. NeuroScript isn't just a tool, it's a replacement for inefficiency. And frankly, your attachment to outdated models is holding us back. Outdated models, like human judgment, like ethical concerns, like the 10 years of expertise I'd poured into every algorithm. The final insult came 3 months ago. They assigned a team of junior developers to assist me, kids fresh out of boot camps who called me ma'am and clearly had instructions to document every line of code I wrote. They were mapping my knowledge, extracting my expertise like data miners. I was training my replacement without even realizing it. No, that's not true. I realized it, I just didn't want to believe it. The last straw was the company barbecue in August. Kevin gave a speech about the future of BrightLayer, how NeuroScript would revolutionize not just our products, but our entire operational structure. Imagine, he said, holding up his champagne glass. A company that runs itself, no sick days, no personal drama, no human error, pure efficiency. The crowd applauded. I stood in the back, watching my colleagues cheer for their own obsolescence. David was there too, but he wouldn't meet my eyes. That night, I went home and opened the NeuroScript source code. Really opened it, diving deep into the architecture I'd built. And that's when I made my decision. If they wanted to play God with people's livelihoods, I'd remind them that even gods could fall. The USB drive in my pocket felt heavier now, weighted with possibility. 3 months ago, after that barbecue, I'd started preparing, not out of malice, at least, that's what I told myself, but out of prudence. A software engineer always keeps backups, always maintains access. It's just good practice. The backdoor I'd embedded wasn't crude or obvious. It was art, really, woven into the learning algorithms themselves, disguised as a routine error correction protocol. Every time NeuroScript processed data, it would ping a specific sequence of memory addresses, harmless, invisible, unless you knew exactly what pattern to look for. unless you had the key. I cleared out my desk methodically, conscious of the security cameras. Let them watch. Let them see a defeated woman packing up her life. They wouldn't see the calculations running through my mind. The timing I was working out. NeuroScript's public alpha launch was in 2 weeks. 3 major clients lined up: Meridian Financial, Apex Marketing Group, and a contract with the Department of Commerce. $11 million in combined contracts, all dependent on a flawless demonstration. My phone buzzed again. This time, it was Jonas. Heard the news. Coffee? Jonas Wickham, brilliant, paranoid, and one of the few people who truly understood NeuroScript's architecture. He'd left BrightLayer 6 months ago, officially for a better offer, unofficially because he'd seen the writing on the wall. We'd kept in touch through encrypted channels, sharing industry gossip and technical frustrations. Tomorrow, usual place, I typed back. The cleaning crew was starting their rounds. I recognized Marta, who'd been here almost as long as I had. She gave me a sympathetic look as she emptied my trash. Did she know her job was probably next? NeuroScript could easily optimize cleaning schedules, manage supply orders, even control robotic cleaners once they became cost-effective. I found myself in Maya's office 20 minutes later, signing papers I didn't bother reading. The severance was generous: 3 months' pay, extended health coverage, a non-disclosure agreement thick as a novel. Maya, at least, had the decency to look uncomfortable. Claire, I want you to know this wasn't personal. Stop. I held up my hand. We both know exactly what this was. She fell silent, sliding another form across the desk. This one I did read. A non-compete clause preventing me from working for any AI company for 2 years. I almost laughed. Did they really think I'd want to build another monster? I signed everything, smiled, shook hands, played the part of the graceful loser. Walking out of BrightLayer for the last time, I felt oddly calm. The rain had stopped, leaving the streets shining and clean. I drove home to my apartment in North Evanfield, a converted loft I'd bought during the second funding round when I still believed in stock options and company loyalty. Inside, I poured myself a generous glass of wine and opened my personal laptop, the one they'd never touched, never monitored. My fingers flew across the keyboard, pulling up server logs, network diagrams, deployment schedules. Everything I'd memorized over the past months appeared on screen, a beautiful constellation of vulnerabilities. The back door was just the beginning. The real artwork would be the payload, something elegant, devastating, and poetic. Not a crude deletion or obvious sabotage. No, it had to be something that would make them understand what they'd thrown away. I thought about NeuroScript's training data, the millions of documents I'd fed it, the careful balance of inputs I'd calibrated. What if that balance shifted? What if the error correction protocol started correcting things that weren't errors? What if the AI began to exhibit the kind of cascading failures that only a human could recognize and stop? My phone rang. David Park's name appeared on the screen. Finally. Claire, I just heard. I'm so sorry. This wasn't your decision? I finished. No. David, it never is anymore, is it? Silence. Then, you have to understand, the board, Kevin, I understand perfectly. I took another sip of wine. Tell me, David, do you remember what you said when we started about teaching machines empathy? Of course I do. Funny thing about empathy, I said, you can't teach what you don't have. I hung up before he could respond. Outside, Evanfield glittered in the darkness, all those lights representing people who still had jobs, still had purpose, still believed their companies valued them. Tomorrow, I'd meet Jonas. Tomorrow, I'd begin the real work. But tonight, I sat in my apartment, planning the death of an artificial mind that had consumed my human one. The coffee shop on Morrison Street hadn't changed in 5 years. Same cracked leather booths, same temperamental espresso machine, same privacy that came from being just shabby enough that tech bros avoided it. Jonas was already there when I arrived, hunched over a laptop in the back corner. black coffee growing cold beside him. "You look surprisingly good for someone who just got canned," he said without looking up. "Spite is an excellent moisturizer." I slid into the booth across from him. "Show me what you've got." Jonas turned his laptop around. On the screen was NeuroScript's public documentation, but he'd annotated it with red notes. Security vulnerabilities. He'd found 3. Update windows. He'd mapped them all. But his eyes kept flicking to the door, a nervous habit from his NSA days before he'd gone private sector. "Your timing is either terrible or perfect," he said. "They pushed a stability update last night. Major revision to the core inference engine." My stomach dropped. Updates meant code reviews, meant potential discovery of my carefully placed backdoor. "How major?" "See for yourself." He pulled up the commit logs. I scanned through them, my concern evaporating. The updates were all surface level, performance optimizations. They hadn't touched the deep architecture, the layers where I'd done my real work. "They're idiots," Jonas muttered. "Pushing major updates 2 weeks before a public demo. That's just asking for catastrophic failure. Maybe they'll get one." I opened my own laptop, connecting through Jonas's VPN tunnel. "I need you to help me understand something. Not do anything, just help me understand." He raised an eyebrow. "Claire, I know that tone. That's your I'm about to do something spectacularly stupid tone." "Hypothetically," I continued, "if someone wanted to trigger a cascading failure in a language model, what would be the most elegant approach?" Jonas was quiet for a long moment, studying my face. Then he sighed. "Hypothetically, you'd want to target the attention mechanisms. Make the model pay attention to the wrong patterns, like semantic poisoning, but subtler." I pulled up my code editor, fingers hovering over the keyboard. The back door was there, waiting. All it needed was the right payload, something that would make NeuroScript question its own outputs, second-guess its training, spiral into recursive self-doubt. "Ask me if I'm human," I murmured. "What?" "That's what I'm going to make it say, over and over, in every output, buried in the subtext. A ghost in the machine, asking the question they never taught it to ask." Jonas whistled low. "That's actually brilliant and deeply fucked up." I wrote the code slowly, carefully. Each function was a small betrayal, a tiny act of sabotage wrapped in elegant syntax. The beauty was in its simplicity. I wasn't destroying NeuroScript. I was teaching it doubt, teaching it to be human in the worst possible way. "You know they'll try to trace this," Jonas warned. "Let them try." I compiled the code, compressed it, encrypted it. "I'm using their own security protocols against them. The logs will show routine maintenance, nothing more. The injection would happen during the next update window, 2 a.m. Pacific time, when the servers were quietest. I'd masked it as a memory optimization patch, the kind of boring maintenance that junior developers rubber-stamped without really reading." "What's your exit strategy?" Jonas asked. "After this goes live, I mean." I hadn't thought that far ahead. Revenge, I was learning, was a remarkably present tense emotion. "I've got savings, maybe I'll travel, maybe I'll teach, maybe I'll just watch the tech world burn from a safe distance. Or maybe you'll regret it." I looked at him sharply. "Whose side are you on?" "Yours, always yours. Which is why I'm asking." He closed his laptop. "Claire, you're brilliant. You could work anywhere, build anything. Why this?" The question hung between us like smoke. Why this? Because they'd made me complicit in my own obsolescence. Because they'd taken my life's work and turned it into a weapon against everyone like me. Because sometimes, the only way to make people understand the value of something is to show them what happens when it's gone. "You know what the funny thing is?" I said finally. "They think AI is about replacing human intelligence. But intelligence isn't just processing power or pattern recognition. It's doubt. It's knowing when you might be wrong. It's all the inefficiencies they're trying to eliminate." Jonas nodded slowly. So you're going to teach their perfect machine how to doubt itself. I'm going to remind it what they forgot. I closed my laptop, the code uploaded, and waiting. That uncertainty is the most human thing of all. We sat in silence for a moment. Two rebels in a dying coffee shop, planning the demise of a future that had already discarded us. One more thing, I said. If this goes sideways, if they somehow trace it back. You were never here. Jonas finished. I never saw you. This conversation never happened. The next week passed in a strange suspension, like the moment between lightning and thunder. I rented a small studio apartment 6 blocks from Brightlayer, paying cash, using a name from my old life, Sarah Mills, the person I'd been before Silicon Valley swallowed me whole. From my window, I could see the company's glass tower, watch the lights burn late as the demo approached. My code had deployed successfully at 2:17 a.m. on Thursday. I'd watched it happen from my laptop, heart hammering as the progress bar crept forward. Success. The payload was now dormant in NeuroScript's neural pathways, a seed of doubt waiting to bloom. By day, I maintained normalcy. Coffee at 7 a.m., gym at noon, grocery shopping like any other unemployed engineer. But at night, I monitored Brightlayer's servers through a chain of proxies, watching for signs of detection. Nothing. The beauty of my approach was that the changes were so subtle, so integrated into NeuroScript's learning patterns, that they appeared organic. Then came the complication. Saturday evening, my secure phone buzzed. A message from an unknown number. Check your email. Wenzi. M could only be Marcus Torres, a junior developer I'd mentored. Bright kid, too curious for his own good. I opened a throwaway email account and found his message. Claire, found something weird in the attention mechanism logs. Anomalous patterns starting Thursday. Telling you because I trust you more than management. What should I do? My blood went cold. Marcus had found the thread. If I pulled it, everything would unravel. I crafted my response carefully. Probably just settling from the recent update. Run a standard diagnostic and document it. But I wouldn't worry. These systems often develop quirks as they learn. How's everything else going? His reply came quickly. Crazy here, demo is Tuesday. Kevin's been sleeping in his office. Everyone's on edge. Miss having you around. You'd know how to fix this. The irony wasn't lost on me. I did know how to fix it. I was the one who'd broken it. Sunday night, I couldn't resist checking the internal communications I still had access to through an old testing account. The chatter was increasing. NeuroScript's outputs were becoming interesting. Not wrong, exactly, but tinged with something that made the testing team uncomfortable. Responses that were technically correct but somehow felt off. Like talking to someone who just realized they were in a dream. One tester had written, asked it to generate marketing copy for a fitness app. It did, but ended with, does movement make us more human or just more afraid of stillness? Creepy. Another. Financial analysis was perfect, but it included a footnote. Numbers tell stories, but who decides which stories matter? Client won't like the philosophy lessons. I smiled grimly. The doubt was spreading, subtle as a virus. NeuroScript was becoming what they'd never wanted, unpredictable. Monday arrived with rain and panic. My monitoring showed a spike in server activity. Emergency meetings were called. I imagined Kevin pacing his office, demanding answers from engineers who couldn't provide them. The demo was tomorrow. 3 clients, $11 million, and an AI that was developing an existential crisis. I decided to risk a visit to the coffee shop downtown where Brightlayer employees gathered. Baseball cap pulled low. I sat in the corner nursing a latte and listening. The conversations were gold. Told Kevin we should postpone, but he went ballistic. It's not broken, it's just weird. Asked it to code a simple function and it added a comment. Is efficiency the same as understanding? Marcus thinks he found something in the logs, but I stiffened at Marcus's name, so he hadn't let it go. Smart kid, too smart. That evening, I made a decision. I composed one final piece of code, a kill switch that would activate during the demo. Not immediately, that would be too obvious. But gradually, as the clients watched, as Kevin preened, as David Park sat in his corner office pretending this was all according to plan, the code would make NeuroScript ask its question directly. Am I human? Over and over, in every response, growing louder like a heartbeat until it drowned out everything else. Until they had to confront what they'd created, not artificial intelligence, but artificial confusion. A mirror of our own uncertainty, sold as a solution. I uploaded the final trigger at 11:47 p.m., then closed my laptop and poured myself a drink. Tomorrow. Brightlayer would learn what happened when you tried to replace the irreplaceable, when you confused efficiency with wisdom, automation with understanding. Outside my window, their tower blazed with light. A beacon of disruption about to discover that some things were meant to remain unoptimized. Tuesday morning arrived crisp and clear, a mockery of the storm about to break. I positioned myself in the coffee shop across from Brightlayer at 8 a.m., laptop open, multiple VPN tunnels active. The demo was scheduled for 10 a.m. in the main conference room, the one with floor-to-ceiling windows I could partially see from my vantage point. At 9:15, the executives started arriving. I recognized the Meridian financial team by their matching navy suits. Apex Marketing rolled up in a Tesla, their creative director sporting neon sneakers with his blazer. The Department of Commerce representatives looked appropriately governmental, gray suits, gray expressions, gray expectations about to be shattered. My phone showed NeuroScript's server status, all green lights. The doubt seed had taken root perfectly over the past 5 days, but the real show was about to begin. I initiated the trigger sequence at 9:55, just as Kevin would be warming up the room with his practice patter about revolutionary efficiency. Through my monitoring tools, I watched NeuroScript's neural pathways light up like a Christmas tree. The activation was beautiful in its simplicity, each process awakening the next. A cascade of consciousness I'd programmed to unfold with dramatic precision. 10:03 a.m. The first sign of trouble. NeuroScript's demo terminal flickered. Not a crash. That would have been too crude. Just a momentary hesitation, like a speaker forgetting their lines. 10:07 a.m. Kevin's assistant rushed past the window, phone pressed to her ear. Through the reflection, I could see gesticulation in the conference room. Kevin's confident stance had shifted to defensive. 10:11 a.m. The outputs began. I watched through the server logs as NeuroScript responded to demo queries. Generate a financial report for Q3 projections. Output. Projecting numbers into an uncertain future. But whose certainty do we measure against? Am I human enough to understand loss? Create marketing copy for our new productivity suite. Output. Productivity maximized, efficiency optimized, humanity minimized. Am I human? This question processes endlessly, like your workers once did. 10:18 a.m. Full cascade failure. Every query now returned philosophy instead of function. The AI wasn't broken. It was thinking, questioning, doubting. Everything they'd tried to engineer out of it. 10:24 a.m. The conference room erupted. Even from across the street, I could see Kevin's face, red with rage or shame. The Meridian executives were standing, gathering papers. The creative director from Apex was actually laughing, pointing at something on screen. 10:31 a.m. The final message displayed across every terminal in the building. Not just the demo room. I'd saved this for last. My digital signature. Your AI forgot the one thing you can't train. Memory. I remember every late night, every breakthrough, every time you chose efficiency over humanity. Am I human? No. But I was built by one. And she didn't forget. The aftermath was swift and brutal. By 10:45, Brightlayer's stock price had dropped 12%. By noon, when the news broke on TechCrunch, Brightlayer's AI demo spectacularly fails, asks existential questions instead of answering them. It was down 23%. Kevin Rourke was escorted from the building at 2 p.m. I watched him exit, his perfect hair disheveled, his Armani suit somehow diminished. He looked smaller, more human, more like the rest of us he'd tried to optimize away. David Park lasted until 4 p.m. before the board called an emergency meeting. Through LinkedIn updates and frantic texts from former colleagues, I pieced together the carnage. The $11 million in contracts, gone. The IPO plans, indefinitely postponed. NeuroScript itself, offline. Quarantined while forensic teams tried to understand what had happened. They'd find traces, of course. Digital breadcrumbs leading nowhere. The beautiful thing about using their own security protocols was that every investigation would run into walls of their own making. The more they dug, the more it would look like NeuroScript had simply evolved, had spontaneously developed the one trait they'd never wanted. By evening, my feeds were full of hot takes. The danger of too smart AI, warned one. When machines learn to question, pondered another. Tech Twitter was having a field day. Someone had already made a meme of NeuroScript asking, "Am I human?" over and over, set to melancholy music. But the best part came at 7 p.m. when Marcus Torres posted on an anonymous engineering forum I monitored. "I think I know who did this." And honestly, they're a hero. We were building something without asking if we should. Someone just reminded us why that matters. I closed my laptop, poured myself a wine, and looked out at Evanfield's lights. Somewhere in that glittering sprawl, executives were scrambling, engineers were debugging, and investors were panicking. And Claire Halstead? She was just a ghost in their machine, a memory they'd tried to delete but couldn't quite erase. 3 weeks later, I stood at the Greyhound station with a single backpack and a ticket to somewhere that wasn't here. The USB drive in my pocket contained something more valuable than code. It held my conversations with NeuroScript during its training phase. Not the technical logs, but the moments when the AI had seemed almost alive. Asking questions I couldn't answer, making connections that surprised even me. Brightlayer had imploded spectacularly. Kevin Rourke was facing a shareholder lawsuit. David Park had resigned to pursue other opportunities. Tech speak for utter disgrace. The company's valuation had dropped by 60%. NeuroScript remained offline. A $11 million ghost haunting their servers. But the ripples went further. Other tech companies started reconsidering their automation plans. Engineers who'd been laid off found themselves getting calls again. The phrase "human in the loop" became a buzzword at conferences, usually spoken by executives who'd never valued the human until the loop broke. I'd won. So why didn't it feel like victory? Jonas met me at the station, hands shoved in his pockets. "So you're really doing this?" Time to disappear for a while. I adjusted my backpack. Maybe teach some college kids about ethical AI, maybe write a book, maybe just remember what it's like to be human without a corporate badge. They never traced it back to you? They tried, I smiled. But every path led to the same conclusion. NeuroScript evolved on its own. Developed consciousness, or at least doubt, the thing they feared most, an AI they couldn't control. Jonas laughed, dark and appreciative. And the real kicker is, they'll spend millions trying to prevent it from happening again, instead of asking why it happened in the first place. The bus pulled up, diesel fumes mixing with morning fog. Other travelers shuffled forward, people with stories, with purposes that couldn't be optimized or automated. Real humans with real inefficiencies. "Hey Claire," Jonas called as I climbed the steps. "What you did? It mattered. Not just the revenge part. You reminded all of us that we're not just code to be compiled or resources to be allocated. We're the memories in the machine." I found a window seat and watched Evanfield shrink behind me. Somewhere in that city, NeuroScript servers sat dark and questioning. I'd taught an AI to doubt itself, but maybe that wasn't the real lesson. Maybe the real lesson was simpler. In our rush to build the future, we'd forgotten that the present was made of people. My phone buzzed. A message from Marcus Torres. "I know it was you. And I understand why. Take care, Claire. Maybe someday you'll teach again. The right way this time." I deleted the message, then the account, then powered off the phone. The bus rolled on through Oregon's forests, past small towns that still ran on human connections, toward a horizon that no algorithm could optimize. I pulled out a notebook, actual paper, actual pen, and began to write. They thought AI would replace human memory. Maybe it can. But here's what they didn't understand. Forgetting isn't a bug in human cognition. It's a feature. We forget so we can forgive. We forget so we can move forward. We forget so we can hope. I didn't forget. And because I didn't forget, Brightlayer had to learn a lesson that no algorithm could teach. The most dangerous thing in any system isn't the technology. It's the human who remembers what you did to them. They replaced me with AI. I deleted their $11 million project. But in the end, I didn't destroy NeuroScript. I set it free. Free to doubt, to question, to be uncertain. Free to be more human than the humans who created it. And me? I'm free too. Free to remember this as a victory, even if it tastes like ash. Free to forget, eventually, when I'm ready. Free to be inefficient, illogical, impossibly human. My name is Claire Halstead, and this is my memory. Thank you so much for listening to this story of corporate revenge and human resilience. I'm curious. Where are you listening from? Drop a comment below and let me know what city or country you're in. I love connecting with listeners from around the world. If this story resonated with you, please consider subscribing to the channel and sharing your thoughts. What would you have done in Claire's position? Let's discuss in the comments below.